Hey guys, what's going on? It's If You Have to Pick Three. I'm Matt.
And I'm Zach.
And if you haven't joined us for an episode of Pick Three before, well, you're in for a treat this time. What we normally do is we go ahead and we put together, each of us, we put together a list of 3 items, and then we fight it out to see what the final 3 list is going to be. And this time, well, you've already clicked on the video, so you know what we're doing. We are doing music-themed movies. Zach, why don't you give them a little bit more about what's going on here?
You know, we love movies. We especially love movies that are based on music in some way. But now, well, let me backtrack a little bit, Matt. Are you ready for me to ask the question that you always dread?
Do I have money for lunch?
No. Are you ready to feel old?
Oh, that question.
Because in September of 2020, a little movie called Almost Famous turns 20 years old.
Shut your mouth.
I will not.
Shut your mouth right now.
That would go against everything that a podcast is about if I shut my mouth. So it's one of the most great, like just incredible, touching movies about music. I mean, it's a classic. That's all you really have to say about it. And because this classic film is turning 20 years old, we thought it'd be fun to name the 3 best fictional. It's important to say fictional because there's a lot of great biopic films about musicians. There's a lot of great also musicals, but fictional films with a music theme to it, or it's loosely based on music in some way. And the catch, though, is that neither of us can choose Almost Famous, because if one of us did, that would automatically be number 1. It's just that great. Matt, are you still okay with that role?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I think it's safe to assume that if you're listening to this podcast on this topic, you pretty much are guaranteed to like Almost Famous.
I also feel like you can tell a person's character by how they react to hearing Tiny Dancer for the first time. If they don't automatically...
Wait. Hold on. It's Tiny Dancer? I thought it was Tony Danza.
Tony Danza? Oh, it might. We'll have to go back and watch the movie again for the 18th millionth time. But you suck, Matt. Anyway, like it's just there's so many incredible classic moments, and the way that it levels just real, actual historic moments in the 70s music with a fictional love story attached to it in a way too. It really captures the music scene of the 70s so well. So it just has to be number 1. And if you don't think of Tiny Dancer and think of Almost Famous when you hear that song, I don't know if I want to know you, to be honest. And if you don't even know what we're talking about when we say the Tiny Dancer scene, you need to stop listening to the podcast. I mean, pause it. Don't automatically stop. Go watch the movie and then come back and then listen to this episode. So without further ado, Matt, I'm going to let you go first. Share your 3. Share your 3 first.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. Number 1. Actually, I'm going to go in the order that I saw these. No other particular order. Okay. So number 1 was actually directed by Tom Hanks.
And I know what you're going to say, and yeah, it's a great film. Continue.
Oh my God. This is obviously one of my favorites, but I remember when I first saw the movie, I couldn't get enough of it. And it's just such a great story about it's a feel-good story about a band coming up in the 60s and the late 50s, 60s, somewhere in there. I forget the exact time range, but it's a great story about a band who was just this local band. And then their drummer broke his arm, and then they get a replacement drummer. And, they took a song that they were kind of good with, and then sped the tempo up just a little bit, and boom, they've got a hit. And then a little conversation between the drummer and Liv Tyler, and boom, they got a band name. So now they're starting to blow up all over one song. So the band's name is The Wonders. The movie's name is That Thing You Do. Love this movie from start to finish. I can't get enough of it. And if you've seen this movie and you haven't seen the director's cut, there are very few movies that I actually say that you need to watch the director's cut for, and this is one of them. This movie gains about a half an hour to 45 minutes of length and explains a lot more of the story than watching the original theatrical release. So if you've never done that, go do it. It's such a great movie. If you've never seen That Thing You Do, you're missing out. A and B, they actually I didn't follow the story as much as I probably should have, but the band actually was going to get together, and I think perform That Thing You Do, the name of their song, for a COVID relief type thing. And in memory of, actually, I forget the Fountains of Wayne lead singer name, but because he passed,
Adam Schlesinger.
yes, because he passed away in the middle of all this, and he actually wrote the song. They were going to do like a little mini tribute for him as well. So, yeah, just a really good kind of feel good story, kind of coming out of the whole COVID thing.
Actually, and to add on to that, that tribute, if you haven't seen That Thing You Do, which you really are missing out, all four the actors who played the band in the movie, they actually filmed themselves all in like a Zoom chat watching the movie so that you can watch along with it while they add commentary to it. So kind of similar to the director's cut. They did their own little like Zoom audio commentary on it too. So it's actually it's a nice tribute to it. And it's one of those like great songs too that you kind of like, oh man, I can't believe that's not quote unquote real
actual
song.
Right, exactly. I love this movie. Hands down.
Hello, Pittsburgh.
Hello
Pittsburgh. That's a moment from the movie that you would know if you watched it.
Yes. Let's jump to number 2.
Yes.
All right, number 2. I was actually working at and this will show how long ago this was. I was actually working at a Blockbuster when this movie came out. And
what an old-timey statement.
I know, right?
I was working at a Blockbuster when I was a child.
I can't believe that that's actually a statement that I can make now, and I feel old. That's even more than the question that you ask me all the time. This is just me feeling old, and I made myself feel old, which is the worst. But anyway,
sell the popcorn at the counter so that the kids could rent the movies with the popcorn. Sorry, that's what I would imagine you'd say to your grandchildren when we use the days of the Blockbuster.
And then, oh God, and then the memes that are coming up, like, this is what a Friday night used to look like. Fuck right off.
So you're working whatever this movie is to remind you of your days working at Blockbuster. Continue.
Yeah. So I used to, just walk around the store and, putting the DVDs back on the shelf. You'd see all the big titles, and then there would be like little lesser known titles. They have like, only a few covers facing you and whatnot. And this actually was one of them. And I picked it up because Mark Wahlberg's name was on the cover, and so was Jennifer Aniston. I'm like, I have no idea what the hell this movie is, but it looked really cool. And it was called Rockstar. I was like, this is kind of interesting. So took it home, popped it in, and it is actually a really good movie. And I think it flies under the radar of a lot of people who aren't sure of, some music movies are kind of really hit and miss. And, Mark Wahlberg, Jennifer Aniston in this movie that not a lot of people know about, actually is a great movie and just a great story from start to finish. And there's a lot of really great music in here as well. So if you've never seen the movie, story is that Mark Wahlberg is in a fictional metal tribute band to a band called Steel Dragon, and they, Mark takes it super seriously, and he wants to play everything note for note, sing it note for note, and the guys are kind of like, back off a little bit, we're just a cover band. He's like, no, we're a tribute band. And then so he's taking it too seriously, and they kick him out of the band. And then, well, it turns out that the lead singer of Steel Dragon, well, he was kicked out of Steel Dragon. And then they were hosting auditions, and then promoter finds him and whatnot, goes to audition, and he actually is a part of the band Steel Dragon. So he goes through this whole rigmarole of touring and whatnot, and it shows like the degradation of his relationship with Jennifer Aniston and whatnot. And then it shows him leaving the band and becoming a, just like an acoustic act toward the end. But it's a really good story. No, well, it's not really a spoiler. There's a lot that happens, and it leads to something, and it leads to something more in the end. But
I was obsessed with that movie as a kid. Obsessed with it. I was obsessed with the soundtrack. I can't really say that the movie's aged so well over time, but I was obsessed with it when I was younger, and I actually got to, for Metal Insider, the website I used to be assistant editor to, got to interview Miles Kennedy about his appearance in the film.
Yes, and there's actually a lot more musicians than just Miles Kennedy in the film.
Yeah, in
Uh,
fact, he like blink and you'll miss him. But like, there's Zach Wild. He's actually in the band Still Dragon.
yep, Jason
Jeff
Bonham.
Pels, Jason Bonham. That's how Jason Bonham and Zach Wild first met. And then there's Jeff Pilson from Dokken. He's in the band. Actually, the singer from Third Eye Blind plays the singer in the competing tribute band, if I recall correctly.
I think so. Yes.
There's a lot of like, this was like a movie made post, like Almost Famous was huge, and they're like, all right, can we do an 80s version of what Almost Famous did for the 70s? And it was, I guess it kind of met with, actually, so you know who it's based loosely on, right? The movie?
Why don't you tell him?
Judas Priest. So the film initially got off the ground as a retelling, quote unquote, true story of when Tim Ripper Owens, who started off at a Judas Priest tribute band, ended up replacing Rob Halford in the real Judas Priest. However, quickly into when the movie was making the press rounds, the band kind of distanced themselves. Like, that's not completely true. They say this happened in the 80s and we did this in the 90s and it wasn't really that successful when we did it. Like, it was quick. It started off as like a Judas Priest movie that quickly like saw them like really like it. Even like now Tim Ripper Owens goes, yeah, that like really was loosely based on what I did, like loosely.
Yeah.
I was just it's just funny how like it started off as a Judas Priest movie that turned into something completely different.
But it's an amazing movie nonetheless. I love it. And one of actually my favorite songs of all of this is toward the end of the movie when he is in his like acoustic band is they do a cover of the Verve Pipe's Colorful. And if you've never heard that song, I've never seen the movie, go listen to the song. It's an incredible song, in my opinion.
It's actually a great cast. Great cast.
The whole movie is just very well done, in my opinion. You say it doesn't age well. I say it's still just as good as ever, but that's just me.
Fair enough. So number three.
Number three. I mean, I can't even just preface this with anything else because you're going to know exactly what it is right off the bat. I mean, you talk music with Jack Black, and immediately just you see his face light up, and he's just one of those people who loves music through and through. And then to put him in a music with a bunch of child prodigy musicians who are just incredible, like in every sense of the word. Well, you know, this movie hasn't really aged well, in my opinion, after the kid who played the guitar player, he actually tried to steal guitars from, I think it was Sam Ash Guitar Center, and was like on drugs or something and whatnot. But be that as it may, looking at this movie and just seeing these kids come together and play the music themselves along with Jack Black. I mean, you cannot not love School of Rock. It's a great story. It's a great story. It's a real feel-good movie, in my opinion. If you've never seen this, you're living under a rock. And if you're a music fan, you need to see this at some point. I mean, that's what you can say about this movie.
It created a musical.
It did. It created a musical.
Andrew Lloyd Webber created a musical based on School of Rock.
And Jack Black's performance in here is absolutely incredible. To know that he's probably the worst musician in the room, in a room full of these kids, is a statement of how great these kids are. Those are my three. So we've got Rockstar, we've got School of Rock, and That Thing You Do.
That's a lot of rock.
It is.
All right.
What about you?
So first, I'm a little surprised / disappointed this wasn't in your list.
Go on.
Because frankly, when you think, not only when you think of rock movies or rock comedies, but when you think of mockumentaries, the film that automatically comes to mind is Spinal Tap. One of the most hysterical comedies. And literally, it created the blueprint for mockumentary style comedies. All the films that Christopher Guest would go on to do, like Best in Show, or even just literally any comedy TV show or movie that would like kind of break the fourth wall. And this movie just has so many hysterical classic moments, from Stonehenge to Hello Cleveland. And what makes it even funnier is it's about, you know, this aging metal band in the 80s trying, you know, on a comeback tour that just goes to shit. And what makes it so funny is that for fans, this was a comedy. But for musicians, it was a horror movie because not
This
only
was the main reason it's not on my list was that statement.
because it's so true. But like,
Yes.
it literally, I mean, one, actually, there are some, and there's definitely some arguments as to whether or not some things were inspired by real life events, but literally every rock star that you talk to who was popular in the 70s or 80s, they say how, as funny as it is, it was horrifying at the time for them to watch. It's like, who let the secrets out? Who told them about the time he got lost backstage? Like, the fact that it hits so close to home and is still hysterical speaks volumes. I mean, even the fact that in 2002 it was actually deemed culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress and was selected for preservation by the National Film Registry, that just speaks volumes. So I feel like when you talk about music and film, you have to have This Is Spinal Tap on there. And if you haven't watched that, it's almost a cardinal sin that you haven't. It's just so, and it's still so funny. It's still gut wrenching and just hysterical. So This Is Spinal Tap, first one. My second pick, going in the comedy route again. And it's interesting you said that, That Thing You Do, because I was toying with that on my list too. But then I was like, no, I can't pick that movie over A Hard Day's Night, a film that really captured Beatlemania at its height, but through a lighthearted comedic lens. It was, for some, obviously the Beatles on Ed Sullivan was the first real introduction to the Beatles, but it actually gave fans all over the world a more quote unquote behind the scenes look of what a day in the life of the Beatles was, while still adding in a lot of the Marx Brothers kind of humor. And even the way it was filmed and the way that it positioned the band in this, lighthearted comedy kind of realm, it still influences how pop music is depicted in TV and film today. And just when you see musicians creating some sort of sketches or films, you see the influence of A Hard Day's Night. And it's one of those, I think Mike Myers, the comedian, really put it perfectly, is that when you were a kid and you saw the Beatles running in the train station away from screaming girls, you would think, oh, that's horrifying. I don't want to be that. But instead, every kid was like, oh, I want to be there. I want to be the Beatles even more. I have to go with A Hard Day's Night. So for my third pick, I'm not going to lie, I'm still really torn over this one. And there's a good chance that by the time you hear this episode, I've already changed my mind, because I have a few films in mind, but I'm just going to have to pull the trigger and just say this. And I already can tell Matt's going to hate me for this pick.
Go on.
A Star is Born. The 2018 version starring Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper. Yeah, Matt's eyes are rolling right now. Screw you, Matt. But this really was a great film. And considering that, it's the umpteenth time this movie's been remade. It's a remake that had been gone through so many phases of them trying to do it. And then it's also Bradley Cooper's first time actually directing. All those things considered, this film really had no right to be as great as it was. And yet it was just phenomenal to watch. And obviously everyone talks about the chemistry that Gaga and Cooper had. And of course, the main focus of the film is the love story between Jackson Maine, Cooper's character, and Ally, Gaga's character. But at the same time, it does an amazing job at capturing the rise and fall of a aging musician who has his own demons and alcohol problems in the 21st century. So, as we talked about all the films before, they did a great job at capturing what it was like in the music scenes of a certain era. And I think A Star is Born does that best in today's music scene. Just seeing how Jackson Maine, that character, is at the height of his career and still facing his own alcoholic problems, and then seeing him pretty much literally the tables turn as his love becomes the big pop star and he's on, a has-been at that point. And it also just does an incredible job at showing the sacrifices that musicians today, or at all, have to make in order to have love, but also to have a career in music. And I don't want to say what I mean by that, because if you haven't seen A Star is Born, I don't want to spoil anything. But it just does, in the same way of what Almost Famous and what That Thing You Do for their time periods, I would argue that A Star is Born does that for the current modern music scene. So I'm sticking to that. It's to recap. This is Spinal Tap, A Hard Day's Night, and yes, A Star is Born, the 2018 version. Now, before we debate and go into having the pick out of the 6 we would name as the top 3, I feel like my heart aches right now because there's so many other films I want to I would want to like include as well. I mean, like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm surprised you didn't pick Blues Brothers.
I never really got into Blues Brothers. I know how significant it is. I just never really got into it.
I mean, honestly, it just the amount of appearances from some of R&B's biggest names in it alone make it worth it. But then just John Belushi being I always think back to the car chase to the Toys R Us.
Yep.
Or through the mall.
Yep.
And it's just like, oh, this place has a Toys R Us. Oh, this mall has everything. It's like literally cops are like trying to get like it's.
Mm-hmm.
And then another movie I was really torn with for that third place. It's a movie called Once. Have you ever seen it, Matt?
Once. It sounds familiar.
So they didn't make a Broadway show out of it, but it was made in 2007 on like a shoestring budget. And it's a romantic drama about 2 struggling musicians or buskers in Ireland. And it kind of just shows how, they both have different lives and bounds and just how music kind of brings them together in a beautiful way. It's incredible that they were able to do something on such a small budget, as I mentioned before. If you haven't seen Once, and the music, actually, I mean, the song Falling Slowly from it won the 2008 Academy Award for Best Original Song.
Right.
So it ended up getting a lot of acclaim. And even Steven Spielberg named it as one of his favorite films of that year, I think. So I think that speaks volumes as well. Any other movies that you were torn about including?
There were some, but I mean, I was thinking about Spinal Tap. I didn't put it on my list because of the reason that you very specifically said, because it was such like a shock to the industry when it came out. And while the movie's intent is to be comedy, and it turns into tragedy, and it turned into, kind of like this hard, long look in the mirror, almost like an intervention for the music industry. I was like, you know what? It kind of did what it didn't want to do. So I didn't want to put it in there. But yes, I do realize how culturally significant it is. And I love that movie. But I just felt like, there were more movies on my list that I loved and felt more special to me and felt more kind of focused on what they did. And, that's why they were on my list instead of Spinal Tap. But I don't think there were too many others.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, going into one of your picks, A Hard Day's Night for me almost feels very close to being like a biopic.
That's fair. I mean, it wasn't. There was a script involved and punchlines. It's you can argue it's semi-autobiographical.
Yeah.
So let me throw out a world famous Zach proposition.
Go on.
Compromise. Because fair warning, I'm not going to leave this episode without Spinal Tapping in the final 3.
That's fine.
So I would argue Spinal Tap.
Yes.
And so to me, one of the spots would be either A Hard Day's Night or That Thing You Do. I will give it to That Thing You Do.
Okay.
Leaving the third spot, and we can put Hard Day's Night off to the side, as much as that kind of pains me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would, for the third spot, so it would be Spinal Tap, That Thing You Do, and I would argue either the third slot goes to A Star Is Born or School of Rock. First off, have you seen A Star Is Born?
Not in its entirety.
Ah, Matthew.
Zachary.
Matthew, you're missing out.
Am I?
Yes.
I?
You really, really are. And by the way, I'm not letting Rockstar go into the final 3. As much as I personally like it, out of the other 2 options, sorry, I can't. And I say that as someone who literally loved that movie as a kid. I used to stand up and shout, stand up and let it out.
Well, you come on, man. Like,
No,
how can you say that's still not a great movie?
Because
like,
it's cheesy. Because it's nostalgia for why I love it, not because I think it's still a good movie. It's good for what it is, but I can't let that be in the final three. I'm sorry, I just can't.
All right. Well, I mean, obviously, I'm gonna have to go with School of Rock.
I know you're gonna push for School of Rock. I'll accept School of Rock.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody says that A Star Is Born is a great movie, and you've mentioned this to me before. This isn't the first time. My only problem with it is that it's too new, and to say that
I had a feeling you would say that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too new to kind of say how, great of a movie it is. Okay, yeah, it got critical acclaim. Okay, but then movies that get critical acclaim, unless they're on the level of like Shawshank Redemption, they kind of just fall off, and not a lot of people watch them after, a couple of years. But I mean, just because of what School of Rock is, it's just a great feel-good movie. It does what it needs to do.
I'll also say that for what it has done for also inspiring young kids to pick up music and to pick up instruments, like you can definitely, I mean, you see a million School of Rocks just all over the country. I mean, granted, that was, those School of Rocks were a thing before the movie, but they wouldn't be as all over the place as if it wasn't for the movie. It definitely inspired a new group of youth to pick up an instrument, especially during a time when maybe rock isn't as popular. And, the fact that it had a TV show spinoff, it had a Broadway musical spinoff, I can sleep easy if that's the third movie. So,
Amen.
To recap, the final three that we agree on, this is Spinal Tap, That Thing You Do, and School of Rock. Those are the three best music-themed movies, in our humble opinion, that are not named Almost Famous. Do you agree? Have you been watching a ton of movies lately and you've just discovered a movie that you forgot about and that we should know about? Let us know at Epic Footnote on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Let us know what you think of our list, or if there's a movie that we should listen to. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
Take it easy, guys. See ya.